Well, hey everybody. Starting off with some good news. My dad got out of his hip surgery. So he was having his hip replaced, and he's in recovery. Got a call from the doctor this morning, so that's just some good news. I know I was a bit upset last stream because of stuff in the news, but just remember, stuff in the news, while it sometimes does apply to people in your demographic or something like that, it's your personal life that really matters. And if things are going really well in your personal life, doesn't mean you have to ignore things that are going on in the news, but it's just put things in perspective that, you know, your life can be pleasant and your life can be good. My life is pretty good, as difficult as things can be. As I set a plate down on top of a bunch of basically some kind of garbage can that's in my room with a whole bunch of like already chewed gum and toilet paper from blowing my nose. And before anybody makes the toilet paper jokes, nothing comes out anymore. Okay, so I don't need toilet paper for that. Like a little bit of like comes out, and I just like wipe it on my leg or on my tummy. I don't have big giant ropes anymore. Hey Carla VTuber, what have I walked into? This is why I hit the follow button. Because she's talking about that she doesn't cum ropes anymore. Seriously though, like, yeah, when I say toilet paper for blowing my nose, I literally mean toilet paper for blowing my nose, okay? God, it's things are gonna be so different after surgery, for real. Like, it's gonna be great. But it's just like, think of all the, first of all, after all the like the personal exploration stuff's out of the way, down the line, think about all the new jokes I can have. I can have all the pussy jokes, because I'll actually have a pussy, and I'll know all the like ins and outs. So, literally. I'll but yeah, I'm just reminded that, you know, the people in our lives are very important, and I love my dad so much, contrary to what delusional people on the internet think. Hey Carla, what's up? Yeah, delusional people on the internet, they seem to think they know everything about me and my dad, and it's like, it's so weird. Like, imagine seeing a clip of someone on YouTube and then thinking that you know everything about that person. And then coming into that person's stream and then saying, what you did to your dad is inexcusable. How's your dad? Some people are like, seriously, like, oh, how's your dad doing? Every time I'm streaming, I'm like, why don't you go watch my dad's stream? Like, like, why are you here? Like, why don't you go hang out with him? He doesn't stream. He's not that kind of person. It really does take a very specific type of person to want to do like streaming or like public speaking or any kind of performance, really. Like, not everybody can be a performer. I'm good. I know that a lot of people like, you know, get into like stuff like music or whatever, and there's, you have to like kind of know, like, you just know whether or not you're a performer or whether you just like to play music. You really have to answer that question. Like, am I a performer? Do you want to be on stage and evoke emotions from people? Because that is what a performer is, no matter what art form you're using, no matter what, whether it's music or stage acting or porn acting. But, you know, like, you have to ask yourself, like, what kind of it has nothing to do, I mean, it has, like, obviously what you do matters, but being a performer is not exclusive to a single discipline. A performer is a type of person. How long have you been streaming? Today? Like 5 minutes? I just started the stream. You mean streaming in general? I've been streaming since like 2019, summer of 2019. My appreciation and understanding of streaming has changed significantly over the course of these 4.5 years. Basically, the reason I started streaming was to document my very particular but not unique, certainly not unique, medical journey. Oh, on Kick, I've been streaming since Trainwreck announced it, like last year, like last January. But you know, it's like I started streaming on Twitch in 2019, and it was before I started transitioning. And before then, I kind of saw it as like a delusion, as like, oh, I see all these people streaming chess and they're getting all these like gifted subs and stuff like that. Like, people are subscribing to these people. They're making money playing chess on stream. And like, I was studying chess because I was teaching chess in like a nonprofit to kids. And I was pretty good at it, but I'm not. And as I found out when I started transitioning, I also started going to therapy, and I also got my autism diagnosis, and I just learned how to understand myself better and my limitations, and you know, also my strengths. But basically, I have absolutely. I was extremely good at doing the job. But it was dealing with the people who were providing me employment that was the problem. I don't know how to deal with a boss. I don't know how to deal with coworkers. The only coworker that I got along with was my longtime friend that I've been friends with since I was like 14. You know, it's really like not something that I can really do. It's really hard, and it's, you know, it's frustrating. But like right now, I'm about to have a surgery in like 2 months. My bottom surgery. That's why I was talking about pussy. I'm really excited about that. It's been taking like 4.5 years of direct effort. I've needed it for like 17 or 18 years. Should I say something for you? What do you mean? What do you want to say? You are enough. You are enough, Carla. You're appreciated, Carla VTuber. Unless you're going to try to sell me artwork. Are you going to try to sell me artwork, Carla? Don't do it. Just don't. Don't do it. Don't do it, Carla. Don't do it. Don't try to sell me artwork. Jesus Christ. I mean, I just accused you of it, but, you know, doesn't mean you're going to, but... Don't do it. Don't do it. Just do it. Make your dreams come true. Yeah, listen to Toy Slicer. Don't do it. Just do it. It's make your dreams come true. Yesterday you said today. I'm a virgin. Yesterday you said today. Yesterday you said today. Yesterday you said today. Just do it. But yeah, I mean, it's like people always seem to think like, oh, I want to be a YouTuber, or oh, I want to be a musician, or oh, I want to be like an actor, or like a singer, or whatever. You have to ask yourself, then why aren't you doing it already? Like seriously, just do it. I mean, like, I know it's like we kind of segued in there from the meme, but you know, back to what I was already talking about. But it's like, you have to really ask yourself, are you somebody who just likes the idea of making money from playing music? or whatever, or having people like you because of playing music, or are you actually a performer? And I've known I've been a performer in multiple contexts since I was like 6 years old, or maybe 5, maybe 4. Writing is a performance. You know, it's basically like public speaking, but on paper. You know, or on screen, if you know, nowadays. It's all the same. It's all the same as people writing on cave walls. It really hasn't changed. It's just crazy how people think that technology changes things. It really doesn't. It just facilitates things. There's a difference. You can make it easier, but that doesn't make it like fundamentally different. Like, people have been expressing themselves since like the beginning of human species. Like, make your dreams come true. That's an example of expressing yourself. Make your dreams come true. Make your dreams come true. Make your dreams come true. Oh God, you know, my glasses like this one's fine. How do I tighten this? I don't know how to tighten this. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Captain's log, stardate 4/29/39.22. I just said that really wrong. Captain's log, stardate 4/29/39.22. Let's not even bring up Sonichu. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay then. Yeah, I'm glad my dad's okay. He went in for hip surgery this morning and I got the call from the doctor a bit ago. You know, he's okay. He's going through recovery. He's going to be back later. The collab nobody is ever going to see because it's never going to happen. I tell you, I am not going to have her on my stream ever. It's too much of a liability. People already compare me to Chris Chan. Like people already treat me like they want me to be Chris Chan. Like people on the internet, like on 4chan and shit, they already want me to be her, although they constantly misgender her because they, for some reason, think that being transgender should be gatekept. You know, she's a fucking weird person. A fucking psycho, actually. Now you're living for that collab. Yeah, I don't want that person near me. Yeah, she's like very odd. You know, it's like, it's one thing, like, I feel like I'm redeemable because I'm actually a decent person. I'm not trying to like gas myself up or whatever, but it's like, it's one thing when you have an opportunity to make changes and then you double down on refusing to make changes, and then you have another opportunity to make changes and then you double down on it's like when you just continually just go down a fucking dark rabbit hole, you have to ask yourself, like, maybe you're just a bad person. Like it's just seriously, as much as like I think that she needs some serious help, and I hope that she's gotten it, and unfortunately she was misgendered and sent into like the male side of like prison, you know, for, you know, the thing that happened, that we're not, it's like, I don't even see, it's like you open up this rabbit hole, you can't stop. It's like, he's like, don't bring up Sonichu. Rule number 1 of the internet. No, I mean, I really think that, you know, I don't know this person, obviously. I'm just a cool person. Well, it's just, what I'm saying is that obviously people are going to like have like, you know, mean things to say about me. But the difference is any reasonable person would like look at what's going on in my life and listen to me explain things, or even just have a conversation with me, or even just like glance at what my life is like. Just like a casual glance in my direction will tell anybody that I'm a pretty decent person. I may not be perfect, and I have some problems too, but like most people like can like, you know, most people have to actually remind me that I'm not a bad person. Like I'm constantly really critical of myself. I'm constantly trying to like not be you know, this bad person. I'm constantly trying to change and grow. But like, at what point do I have to say like, you know what? I don't have to change. I don't have to grow. Like that's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get that kind of confidence because I deserve it. And it's not Dunning-Kruger. Like it's actually deserved. And I have like this imposter syndrome of thinking that I'm like this absolute terrible person. I empathize with people so much. I had to stop watching the Chris Chan documentaries for that specific reason, because I kept on attaching myself to Chris Chan. Because I can relate to a lot of the things that happened with the bullying. I'm very different on the spectrum. And whatever the fuck else is going on with her is ridiculous. I have no idea. Only a professional can help with that. But I can relate a lot to people. But I have to remember, I am not that person. I am 100% not that person. Like, absolutely not. And so I had to stop watching those documentaries. It was just bringing me to a really dark fucking place, because my empathy is so much that I start feeling things for people that, you know, like I'm attaching it to myself. I deserve that empathy. I deserve that. And I'm attaching it to other people because I'm like, oh, I see myself in other people. Because I'm like, oh, like, you know, like this person. I mean, obviously, first of all, I have to be very clear. I don't think Chris Chan deserves the level of hate that she gets, and the constant misgendering, even among the trans community. You know, it's very clear, if you want to psychoanalyze it, it's very clear just from watching the small amount of documentary I did watch. It's very clear from an early age that there was something going on with gender. And regardless, there needs to stop being gatekeeping about people's gender. Like, seriously, it doesn't matter if you're a terrible person, you're still your gender. Like, mass murderers are still gendered correctly. Do you understand? Like, I wish people would stop gatekeeping it. Like, gendering something correctly is like a salute or something. It's not. It's just a genuine. It's just a default. Like, it's like, you're not going to say, oh, this person actually isn't trans because, like, this person is mentally ill. It's like, okay, well, what about all the mentally ill people who aren't trans who are gendered correctly? Like there's plenty of, like, mentally ill people who don't have an issue with being misgendered. It's like everybody who, like, does a murder or something. Like, I don't know. But the level of hate that this person gets is like, obviously this person is very sick, and also the people, those miscreant people, those people are very sick. In fact, I would say those people are worse than Chris Chan, because at least Chris Chan has the excuse that she's like autistic and shit and has like severe mental illness. Something weird is going on. Like, something really fucking weird is going on with her, and she deserves to be helped and loved, and not like just like pushed down a fucking rabbit hole. And, you know, obviously she's going to enable it because, like, she never got any actual help. And, you know, like, was severely hurt in many ways, but did not deal with it in the way that is, like, healthy. Okay, like I have to make that very clear. It's not okay. Like, it's like Chris Chan is not okay. Okay, I think everybody knows that. But what about the people who literally stalked her constantly? Like, were like scheming together to, like, cause, like, lolcow content like talking in voice comms in secret to like literally like troll Chris Chan. I feel like that's 3,000 times at least worse. Okay, like these people had a very malicious intent of taking a very mentally ill person and trying to make that person into content. It's very disgusting what happened with Chris Chan in so many ways, like every single direction. And I don't know, it's really hard for me not to empathize with people. I have extreme empathy. That is my side of the spectrum. I have the level of empathy. If you've ever seen the third Hannibal Lecter movie, Red Dragon, the one with Edward Norton, that character, and I guess the book is more detail. And then the series, actually, there's a series on Hulu, or was it on Hulu or Amazon Prime? Yeah, I think it was on Hulu. There was a Hulu series called Hannibal that was about that character. The character that in the movie was played by Edward Norton. I forgot the name of the character. But he's on the spectrum. You know, they say Asperger's. We don't say that anymore in a lot of, well, at least in the U.S. We don't say Asperger's anymore. We just call it all autism spectrum. Yeah, the person, yeah, she went through years of harassment and torture. But you know, it doesn't make everything that happens okay, because now Chris Chan's really like dangerous. Yeah, it's not about excusing, it's about having empathy. That's right. You can have empathy for murderers. Doesn't mean that you're okay with what they did. And I feel like, you know, what therapists do and psychiatrists, it's really like exemplary, and they should be honored. Because some of these people go into prisons and talk to people who have committed murders and other extreme, terrible things. And their job is not to validate what they did, but to try to have empathy for the person and help that person. Which, you know, it's like, obviously, I am not those people. Okay. Okay, like I keep empathizing, and that's why I could never be a therapist or a psychiatrist. I empathize with people so much that I internalize it. It would be an absolute nightmare for me to be a therapist. Ironically, that would make me a good therapist. But I would not want to do that to myself ever. Like, you know, maybe I'm doing a disservice to the world by not pursuing that. You know, it's like you say, like, oh, you know, what if Magnus Carlsen became a doctor instead of a chess champion? It's like, okay, well, I think being a chess champion was like his only destiny. Like, that's because that's who he is. It's like, you know, it's like I'm a performer, okay? And I just don't really have the opportunities. I have a lot of work to do as well. Dr. Melfi, I don't know who that is. But yeah, there's a lot of factors, and I really think if people are going to condemn Chris Chan, they should also be willing to condemn the miscreants. Those people are equal, if at the very least equally as bad as Chris Chan, if not worse, because they, you know, I mean, they have severe mental illness, of course, to be doing what they did, but like, seriously, like, they don't have the excuse of being on the autism spectrum or having, like, you know, the kind of whatever mental retardation or whatever. Oh, the therapist from The Sopranos, yeah. I don't think in the real world Dr. Melfi would have been allowed, like, there's such a thing as patient confidentiality, but their HIPAA requires doctor-patient confidentiality unless there's something that is like a crime going to be committed. So, like, obviously a therapist cannot, like, protect mafia members who are committing murders and shit, because otherwise that therapist would become complacent in the crime. because she's you know, like, you're required, from my limited understanding, is that you're required to report anything that is going to result in a crime, or like a crime being committed, or the intention to commit a crime like that. I don't know, it's really complicated. Honestly, people who are psychiatrists and therapists, they have a job that I don't think many people can do. Especially since a lot of people, you know, they don't really sign up for the job knowing exactly what they're going to do. And like, a lot of the times they work with like people in prisons and stuff. I think that's more for a TV show kind of thing, Cole. I don't think in reality that's how it would play out. I think when the evidence is significant, she would be required by law, or you know, she would have to have her life threatened for her to get off the hook on that. She would definitely lose her license, if not be imprisoned, because I haven't seen The Sopranos, but I mean, I know what The Sopranos is about, okay? It's about mafia, like murdering people and shit. Like, I know what it's about, okay? Like that, you know, burying bodies, okay? Like, it's not, it's significantly obvious what's going on, and if as a professional, you would be required to at least report your suspicions to the police. And like, yeah, obviously if someone makes a direct threat, that's a very obvious thing. I don't think HIPAA allows that. I think HIPAA is very specific. Like, if you think that you could say, it's my opinion that my patient is going to commit a murder. Like, it doesn't matter if you have evidence or not. It's like, you're the one talking to them, and you're required with confidential. Sopranos is about the mafia? What? Yeah, we went from Chris Chan to the mafia. Like, now I'm imagining like a YouTube, like, Sopranos Chris Chan version. Like, oh god, the memes. It's just terrible. You know, all the things about Chris Chan is just absolutely terrible from every single direction. And the fact that people use Chris Chan as a punching bag and a joke is absolutely disgusting, because this person needs some very serious psychological help. And the people who bullied and harassed and trolled and like, instigated all the things that happened, obviously Christine, yeah, the grandson of Chu. Oh god, exactly, the memes, man. The grandson of Chu. Oh my goodness. Oh god. The real Gat. I'm the real Gat. Oh my goodness. This imposter is not the real Gat. And why I'm going to curse ye ha. See, it's like, we can make fun of that early stuff, obviously. Like, that early stuff is pretty silly and funny. But then in context of what happens later and what's happening now, like, it's obviously, like, absolutely, like, terrifying. But it's just so sad. It's just so sad. And I feel like maybe it's because I don't really like investigating too deeply into darkness like this, but I feel like on average it's really depressing that someone like Chris Chan, whose name is Christine, and is female, regardless of whatever the fuck people think about her, she's a fucking psycho, and I don't want her near me, but you know, because I have empathy, because I would be willing to, it's because I would be willing to give her a chance, That's why I can't let her near me, because this is a person that is significantly ill, and I feel like I would cause harm. If I'm going to be real, I feel like just talking to this person might even cause harm, because I'm not a therapist. The way I talk, I'm, people who are severely mentally ill, like I'm too empathetic. And the way I talk, I think it's okay for most people, because most people have critical thinking skills. But for somebody who's extremely mentally ill and who doesn't have the kind of critical thinking skills or the grounding in reality, I think that having a conversation with me might cause more harm than good. So I have like a moral, I kind of have like a moral responsibility. I wouldn't, like, for example, I wouldn't want to have her on my stream just for content. I would love to be able, if I was qualified to be able to kind of like, have an interview, that would be different. Like, but I'm not a doctor. Yeah, let's use the prime directive. Exactly. Twice slicer. Like, she hasn't developed warp, so I can't get in. I can't get involved in pre-warp societies. I've developed warp. Okay, like, you've developed warp. Like, I've definitely gone to warp. But it's fun. The people who, the people who tried to latch on to me, the Kiwi farmers and all that, they thought that I was going to be another Chris Chan. I mean, I don't know this per se, but I'm pretty damn sure that's what they tried to do. Is they saw an autistic person, an autistic trans person, and they saw me freaking out at my dad, and they assumed that I was another Chris Chan. And these kind of sick motherfuckers who like to go into people's lives and instigate problems, these miscreants, and their name is apt because that's what miscreants do. Miscreants are extremely bad people. And the group, the miscreants, is absolutely criminal, and I think should be investigated and charged. Obviously they didn't, they committed a different kind of crime. Severely instigating a mentally ill person into instigating further incidents, because that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Another coffee and I'll go to warp. That is literally what happened. And obviously you can't excuse Chris Chan for all that, especially the thing that got her in prison. But you have to admit that none of this would have happened, most likely. I mean, something would have eventually happened. You have to kind of have to give her some accountability, and also I think the parents were a severe problem. I think the parenting was severely wrong. There's just so many things wrong, and I think it's equally important to actually investigate the miscreant people and criminally charge them with the instigation that they did. The level of like prodding and encouraging that happened. I feel like maybe this will happen, and maybe that's like gonna eventually happen. I don't know. Stuff that happens on the internet isn't just some magical free space for you to just commit crimes. Okay, and that's happening more and more, where the justice system is not forgiving people just for, it's just on the internet, it's just for lols. Yeah, American healthcare sucks too. So there's a whole bunch of things at play. However, I feel like if I was, I was in a very similar situation very early in life, and maybe I'm just privileged to not be on that side of the spectrum, or if I am, it's not related to autism. It might just be like some other mental illness, or like, severe trauma, of course. Like she was actually like molested by like a principal, very early on. And I still feel like there's something else at play, like, some kind of like, mental retardation or something. But at the same time, I was in a very similar situation with being bullied It's very easy. Autistic people are generally very easy targets because we are very trusting of people, and it doesn't. It's not a bad. I'm not ashamed of it. They should be ashamed for taking advantage of it. I am proud. I would rather be trusting and loving of and see the best in people. And because it's like I don't want to like just constantly feel like people are going to hurt me, and accuse people of being evil. But people took advantage of that, and I had to learn, in order to survive, I had to learn how to notice, like, when people are leading me on. Some people are very clever about it, though. But it's really difficult. But early on in life, I was treated not unlike Christian. I was made to believe that people were my friends, but they would like make me sit on like water balloons and then laugh at me and then say, oh, we're laughing with you, it's a joke, we're all friends. And then they would like throw dirt clods at me and rocks. They would put me into like tight little spaces and like or like sit on me, or lock me in like little tight spaces and not open the door and let me out. Like kids treated me like really harshly, but I didn't let that change me. I chose to say, you know what, I must have done, and this is kind of where this came from. I internalized that was my fault when it wasn't. It was 100% people hurting me. It was bullying. But I've internalized that as like, what did I do what did I do wrong? I could have done something different to not be treated that way. If I was only less of an idiot, if I was more likable, if I was more attractive, if I wasn't stupid, and I internalized this. I went internal rather than making, I made a whole bunch of excuses growing up, but the level of delusion that happened with Christian is like, at this point, inexcusable. And there were so many chances for her to actually back out and seek help, and and also get away from the 4chan culture and playing into the trolls. I feel like I am nothing like that. I shut down the Kiwi Farms people immediately because I knew where that was going. I'm like, why do I care what these people think? These people are trash and they're absolute losers because they go on web forums like Kiwi Farms and they specifically seek out like people who are just trying to make a living or just trying to make friends or just trying to make content or whatever. And they find their profiles and they create campaigns to harass them, to make them quit the internet or hurt themselves or commit a crime. That is absolutely mentally ill. Like, these people are not okay. And I can see that for what it is. And instead of playing into it, I just banned them and shut them down. People like Frank Hassel, who showed up to Boogie's house, that dude, and also Boogie, like, what the fuck is wrong with that guy? That guy who made a documentary about himself that was really not painting him in a good light. These people are not okay. They're all the same. If people are the same people who are criticizing Christian are like the same. Like, they're just as bad, if not worse. Yeah, the thing about autism is it's very misunderstood. There is, like, things that are overlapping with autism are kind of exacerbated by it, but like things like depression and social anxiety and being socially awkward, those aren't unique to autistic people. They're just exacerbated by it. Autism is an internal way that your brain processes the reality around you. It has nothing to do with the way you act, except for it has everything to do with you. I mean, the reason why it manifests in certain ways is because your brain goes in different directions as you get older and as you experience reality, which is why every single autistic person is so unique. It's why there's such a spectrum. It's because every single incident that you go through your life, you have a choice to make, and it branches off into a different direction. And then you have a choice to make, and it branches off into a different direction. And every autistic person processes the same kind of stimuli around the world in a very unique and different way. And so what makes autism obvious to people are generally a same family of things, like social awkwardness, social anxiety, depression, PTSD, agoraphobia. These things are pretty common among autistic people. I was going to say trans people, but also a lot of trans people are also on the spectrum. Artistic Argorians? Autistic Argorians? What does that even mean? Bullying happens to a lot of children and lasts with people for the rest of their lives. And unfortunately, autistic people process things much more deeply in a lot of the cases, sometimes less deeply, honestly. There is no way that you can look at somebody and say, oh, that person looks autistic. You can't, it's a misconception. People see people act a certain way, like they're like, okay, well, you know, like they're going like this, or, you know, like, or they're like, you know, they say things a certain way, or they do the, you know, the autistic stare. Those are just outward symptoms of not symptoms, but like those are just outward like manifestations of autism. It has nothing to do with autism. These things could happen to anybody if they went through the same neural pathways. But because autistic people have a very different way of seeing the world, we're more likely to go down those pathways. But non-autistic people could be like that too, which is why it's so hard for people to diagnose, especially in adulthood. That's why it's so difficult. Because a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, they have like all these misconceptions about autism because they're like, oh, well, you know, you're self-diagnosing, you're not actually autistic. I'm also socially awkward. It's like there's so many things that people get wrong about it. It's really hard because it's so invisible. In fact, there's so many people that are autistic that you might never know they're autistic, because they managed to get help early on, or they just specifically, like, for some reason or another, didn't have those manifestations. Like, some people on the spectrum are more like kind of neurotypical passing, I guess, is if you want to put it that way. Whereas, like, you know, even me, like, I was very neurotypically passing, regardless of like my behavior, because my behavior got lumped in with other similar things, and I was never diagnosed as a child. I was just, you know, like, oh, I was like being bullied, so obviously I'm just trying to lash out, or I'm just trying to get help, or whatever, or because like, oh, I'm gifted, and so like I'm very intelligent, and so like these things are still true. I did suffer trauma, and I am very innately intelligent and very like just creative and talented and just like very empathetic as a person. This has nothing to do with me being autistic. You are you. And everything that your body does, your brain, your chemistry, like stuff that manifests biologically, and being trans, I'm betting if we investigate and research being transgender people long enough, I think I have a huge feeling we're going to find a biological link to it. If not already. I feel like they already have like seen that there is a biological, like, trans women's brain, like after death, have the same exact kind of like engrams or whatever you call it, of they have like the same exact kind of chemical makeup as cisgender women, and are extremely different from the, you know, male brains. So there's that. But I really think that we're actually eventually, I think science is going to find an actual biological reason why trans people are trans and why other people aren't. I feel like eventually we are going to find that answer. Because I really do think there has to be some kind of biological reason why I am me. And I feel like everybody has a biological reason why they are themselves. Yeah, the race of reptile people in the Elder Scrolls, it's racist to call them lizards. They think and speak differently from the rest of the races. Yeah. Oh, an Argorian. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, reptiles, they have different kind of brains. They have a different kind of reality. They're cold-blooded. So it's like everything that they experience from birth is fundamentally different from a mammal. So their brain is going to process the world differently. That's kind of what that's a good example, Cole. Like, that is what being autistic is. From birth, your brain is different. And so if you take the two exact same type of people, but one is neurotypical and one is autistic, and if somehow you were able to like superimpose their existence on top of each other, eventually, it's just immediately it's going to branch out. Like, there's going to be choices to be made, and the autistic person is going to make one choice that branches out differently than the neurotypical person. And for me, it was like, I was like, oh, these people are my friends. This is just what being friends is. These people are hurting me, but I have to just put up with it because I must be doing something wrong. That's basically what happened to Chris Chan, but the difference is I have a good heart, and I like decided to eventually, like, I somehow learned that they were the ones who were causing problems. And also I think adults stepped in. I had support, and I also don't have whatever else is going on with Chris Chan. So like the difference is I'm autistic, but I don't have those other severe problems. I also have I was born and raised in California, which has a little bit more resources, I think, for mental health than a lot of other places. The thing is, it's like, diagnosis is not important unless there's a reason to get a diagnosis. But I also think that so many people, especially in the United States, are so reluctant to seek diagnosis because they're like, oh, well, I was always thought I might be autistic, but maybe I'm just socially awkward. It's like, okay, well, if it's affecting your life somehow, maybe you should get some help. And a diagnosis can really help you get resources. And if you don't have those resources, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because there's obviously going to be an overlap with neurotypical people. And like, obviously everyone could be socially awkward. Everyone could have depression and anxiety, but everybody can have it, but everybody is going to have different ways to kind of deal with those. And so autistic people are not going to be able to deal with it on their own the same way a neurotypical person is. So if you actually are autistic, then doing it on your own is just going to turn you, and I know this is extreme, but look at what happened with Chris Chan. Chris Chan tried to deal with it on her own. She did not get help. Like think about it. Do you want to be like that? I know that's an extreme example, but it's like, think about that on like a smaller scale, obviously. But like, if you try to solve it on your problem, but your brain is fundamentally different than the rest of the world's, typically, then when you try to solve it, you're going to be getting the wrong information. You're going to be processing the information in a way that isn't, well, not necessarily wrong, but you're trying to treat your issues as if you were neurotypical when you need to be treating your issues as if you were atypical, if that makes any sense. And it's not like this huge label or this huge problem. Twice, Chan. It's not that, people are afraid of labels. They're afraid that if they hear that they're autistic, that their life is going to be over, or that like, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. If you're autistic, you're actually like probably a part of the human evolution, actually. I don't want to say that like, we're like superior, but like, we're very inferior in certain other ways. But the only reason we're inferior is because society expects certain things from you, and it's really difficult for autistic people to deliver on that. That's the only reason that we can be disabled. That's why we're considered why it's considered like a handicap in some cases. That's why I'm declared permanently disabled, is because society expects certain things from you, and autistic people either have extreme challenges or impossibilities in delivering those. I feel like there's nothing wrong with autistic people. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't think I'm a failure or I don't think I should be deleted out of, obviously my bloodline is deleted from, my specific genome. But my family members have reproduced. So, my family's genes are, continuing on. But my gene pool is over, and also who knows what happens in the future. Maybe somebody is, maybe like we'll be able to reproduce without, the classic way. Maybe we'll be able to produce just by using like a blood sample, because all of our DNA is in our blood. Like, you can get a hair follicle with DNA in it. If we can figure out how to reproduce without a sperm and an egg, because the sperm and an egg, that's like obviously the biological way. But that, all of our DNA is present in like every single cell of our body. So you would think that like at some point, cloning, it's a very, risky path for science to take, especially with genetic engineering. That's a very risky path for humanity to take, because then who's to say, like, if we just like, oh, this gene is autism, how about we just delete that? And then that's a slippery slope. Are you just going to delete people with red hair? Are you going to delete people who are black? Like, are you like, do you see like the slippery slope that has? It can change everything. If you, and also think about it this way: if for like many years you've been fixated on this concept of, I think I might be autistic, but I never got a diagnosis, and I don't think I'm, and you keep going through this circle. Don't you want some answers? Like, maybe to just put a period on the sentence instead of just having a run-on sentence over and over and over? Yeah, exactly, Cole. Exactly. Don't you want some answers? And autism is very, very complex. And obviously, if you're able to take care of a lot of things in your life, it doesn't mean everything in your life is being taken care of. You might be able to hold a job, for example. I can't. But there's autistic people who can hold a job. And they might not know they're autistic, but they're struggling in different ways. And they might not even be aware of it. But having like somebody to, at least going to like a therapist to discuss it. A differential diagnosis, and like, what if it's not autism, but what if it's something else? What if it's actually a biological condition, like a neuro, like what if it's actually like a condition that can be cured with like a medication? Like, what if it's something like that? Like, and you would have never found out if you didn't investigate. Because a lot of things are very similar and have overlap with autism. Like, for example, ADHD has a lot of overlap. But I worked with my doctors for many years. They determined that I'm autistic and don't have ADHD. That I'm not schizophrenic. That I'm not, because there's a lot of overlap with my specific condition. That it's very clear that it's autism related and not schizophrenia or not ADHD, because doctors have like a lot of criteria that they have to cross reference. And it's also not an excuse, because I get to choose, regardless of how my brain works. I still have the choices to make. Yeah, it's just like, you can't have there's no harm in asking a professional, not like an internet survey. You know what I mean? Like, would you take an internet survey to make sure that you had COVID? Like, you could look at COVID, like, COVID symptoms, like, oh yeah, I think I'll go to this crowded place where there's a lot of people, but I might have COVID, but I looked online and I don't think I have it. And you're like, you're like have every single symptom, but you just didn't read it correctly or something like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you going to trust your own limited knowledge as a non-doctor or some random stranger who doesn't have any medical training at all, or the internet, which is the same thing? You're going to trust a Reddit thread on whether or not you should get diagnosed. It's like, it's not about the diagnosis happens only as a necessity for further treatment down the line. Being able to actually talk to a professional to discuss that is way before a diagnosis. You might not even need a diagnosis. You might still be autistic, but you might actually not need a diagnosis, if that makes any sense. Because it's like, just getting help is like so important, and so many people refuse to get help. And at that, I might be very poor financially, and I might have a lot of skills that I'm lacking in the professional world. But one thing that I do have that even multimillionaires don't is that I'm willing to admit that I need help, and that I can go to therapy every week. And it's not about like you're trying to get fixed. That's not what it's about. So many people are convinced that like, oh, I don't need therapy. I'm not broken. It's like, well, you're not broken. But, there's a chance that, a professional who is trained with people who have similar issues as you is probably going to be able to somewhat help you, and they're not going to force it on you unless you're going to commit a crime. And even then, there's only so much they can force on you. You can actually choose to not comply, and you could just be put in prison. But I doubt most people would want that. But you still have the right to not comply with medical treatment, for the most part. Like, even people who are like absolutely like paranoid, delusional, violent, and committing crimes, they'll get arrested, and they have the option of getting mental health treatment, and they decline it. So like, if I want to go full slippery slope extreme example, do you want to be like those murderers and shit who refuse to get therapy? Because they're convinced they don't need therapy. So I'm not, obviously most people are not like that. I'm not, you have your own life, and you have your own choice and your own time that you are ready. Because if you're not ready, then you're not ready. And nobody should force you to do something when you're not ready. But I just wish more people would be a little bit more willing to admit that they need some help, and it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make anything wrong with you. And also, therapy isn't it's not the same as going to a medical doctor because you broke your arm. It's not like you're broken and you need to be fixed. You don't get cured. It's just an advisor. It's somebody to help you make better decisions. Yeah, I mean, I have a bad habit of really belaboring points. And so I hope I don't drive you back in the opposite direction. But I am who I am, and I like to really examine things. And I don't like saying goodbye, basically, because I think like, okay, yeah, I can put it to rest for now. But I think like, people write entire like research papers. Like, people research these things for like decades or even like centuries. So like there could always be further exploration of topics. I have always been fascinated by academia and by the pursuit of knowledge. I think that people give up on it way too quickly. They're like, oh, well, I learned that in high school. I don't need to learn that again. And it's like, or they read something once and they're like, oh, cool. And then they put it away and they never examine it again. And it's like so many people, it's like this TikTok generation, right? You see a TikTok about something, you don't even verify if it's true or not. You don't like ask questions about it. You just accept it as true just because it's like on TikTok, right? Like, so many people do this. They'll like see a YouTube video, and I used to do this too, and I think everybody still does it to an extent. Not every single topic is like, usually like, something that you want to spend a couple hours investigating, but it's like you see a video, someone tells you something and you just accept it as true. And it's like, it's not that you should question everybody and accuse them of lying or misleading you, but it's like, they might be right, and but they also might be right, but they have the wrong angle. And I think this is a really important thing, and this is the main issue I have. I watch a lot of Asmongold, okay, like his videos and what he has to say about things. I highly disagree with a lot of things, but it's not because he's factually wrong. And this is where I think he is convinced that because he's factually right, that makes him right. If that, like, just because you're correct doesn't make you right, because you could be going at a problem with the wrong angle. And you could say, oh, well, everybody agrees on this, and this person is obviously delusional because everybody agrees. It's like, that's a false assumption. Like, you know, I think that's a logical fallacy, or it's logically sound in like this, what is it, the Socrates, like, logic circuits or whatever. Or was it Socrates or was it Aristotle? There's like a logic circuit where you say, like, this and this, therefore this. And you could have a logically sound argument. Like, you could say, when I stepped out of the house, it started raining. Therefore, stepping out of the house causes it to rain. That is a logically sound argument, but it's not true. Yeah, pseudoscience of, obviously, it's not even an era. It's always been like this. And if you look back even into the 60s, especially in the 60s, people created a lot of pseudoscience in the 60s. Okay, they were on LSD. Okay, okay? People thought that you could literally, like, connect to people's minds like a Vulcan. Okay, like people actually thought that. Like, especially like the you know, the Deadheads, you know, like with the Grateful Dead and all that. People thought that LSD was going to unlock like telepathic powers inside of the human mind. People literally thought that. And I think that's when Scientology came around. I don't know. Yeah, she weighs less than a duck, therefore she is made of wood. Burn the bitch. Well, no. The logic would be, this wood weighs less than a duck. This person weighs less than a duck. Therefore, this person is wood. That is a logically sound argument, but it is false. Like, having a logically sound deduction does not make it true. And this is where I have a huge problem, and I wish Asmongold would listen to reason. Because he has a very large following, and these are the people that need to be convinced that, like, trans people are humans and not monsters and not delusional and not mentally ill, unless we're also mentally ill. But that has nothing to do with it. Like, it manifests in its own specific ways, and everybody else. Oh yeah, I think from Monty Python. Was that in Life of Brian? Brian. Brian. You know what's funny is they even brought up trans rights in Life of Brian. But, you know, trans rights and transgender, what people call it, transgender ideology. Transgender medicine has been researched since the 1930s. And like I said, I'll bring this up again. I don't like bringing it up, but it's true. The Nazis shut it down. The same way they're trying to shut it down now. Okay? Oh, it's the Holy Grail. There was a research facility in Germany that was researching gender and transgender medicine as well, and sexuality, like, because gay people exist and trans people exist, so people wanted to, I don't know, do science and actually see what's going on there, because scientists really care about that kind of stuff, about, you know, finding out how things are and why things are. I mean, that's what science is. You know, because obviously, you know, just killing everybody for being gay or trans is obviously not the answer, but that's the one that Hitler came up with, and the Jews. You know, it's like, you know, like, which side of history do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side of the doctors who were researching and very carefully trying to understand transgender medicine to be able to help people? And obviously, it could have gone either direction, but what we found out is that obviously you can't just force somebody to not be trans. So what are you going to do? You want somebody to live a life of pain and suffering, trying to accept that they're never going to be female, or, you know, at the time, you know, trans masculinity was not really discussed, although there was plenty of trans male people. I'm sure it was being researched as well. But most of the time people think of trans people as trans women, because people see that, you know, I think for the most part, like, masculine women are like more socially accepted than feminine men. Even like non-trans people, like even just more feminine men are like less socially accepted than more masculine women, even if they're not trans at all in either direction. Like I just think it's like a little easier. I mean, I don't want to assume things. It's different now, but I think throughout history, obviously more masculine women have like suffered a lot. And not even just trans men, but like people who are just women who are just like more masculine, have suffered a lot. However, I think it's probably like you hide your breasts, you like basically like I feel like if you wear like male clothing, like it's a little, you blend in more, I think, than like somebody who's very like, you know, assigned male at birth and is like wearing a dress. Like society sees that person. Yeah, I mean, I'm going down a really dangerous path. I have a lot of assumptions. Exactly, Curtis. I have a lot of assumptions, so I could be completely wrong. I think it's been bad for both sides, for trans males as well. I think it's very diminished, and also it's hurt a lot of women too, like not just trans men, but you know, all people who were assigned female at birth have been affected by this negative stereotype. And also all people assigned male at birth have been assigned this, because what about people who aren't trans, who are just more feminine? Or what about people who just like to wear women's clothing? You know, but it stands out much more in the way society works. But yeah, like in the 1930s, this was being researched, and in the 60s, it had a resurgence. And there was a lot of like genderqueer, you know, movements in the 60s. And even and like, you know, and then like later on, like I get like in the 80s and stuff, like, I don't know, like in Life of Brian, there was even a scene where it's like, you know, it's like they were saying like, I have the right to be pregnant, and they're like, oh, but you're a man, and it's like, but I have the right to. It's like, I think they're talking about like, you know, like human rights, and like you should have the right to get pregnant, but you can't get pregnant. But like, think about it, what if medical science allowed men to get pregnant? Like, we don't know what science is going to allow in the future, so when we make our laws about human rights, we need to factor in that there are things that we don't know that might be true in the future that this law might affect. And so like when you're coming up with laws, you have to be very careful with how you word them. And unfortunately, a lot of the laws that were created in a lot of countries are inherently transphobic. But it wasn't a problem for the longest time but it wasn't a problem because trans people were mostly shamed out of existing publicly, and anybody who did exist publicly as trans did not have a very good reception. Yeah, women who blended into male-dominated spaces, because you have to basically, if you dress and act like a man, you're like more, I mean, it's just, this is a problem that's like regardless of gender. Then even if you're not gendered as male, if you look and act like a man, you're like more seen as socially acceptable in the workplace and shit like that, because it's like, oh, well, this is, you know, somebody, you know, falling in line, right? Like that whole idea of like, oh, women need to fall in line, you know, that bullshit. Honestly, like there's something that like, obviously I need to stop like victim comparing, because if I'm gonna be actually honest, I feel like I'm less of a victim than cisgender women. But if you really look at the facts, trans women have historically been extremely more vilified than cisgender women, and have had our rights extremely violated historically. If you are assigned male at birth and you present as female, everything about your life is pretty much over. It's a fact. And here's where people, and this is like the thing I was talking about with Asmongold. I'm trying to imagine, like, if he were to listen to what I just said, he would probably say something like, oh, well, that's how it's always been. People don't like people who look different. So you need to stop complaining. And it's like, oh, it's so annoying. Like, he gets annoyed by people trying to fight against something that has historically, like, oppressed people. And I don't think he sees the problem with that stance. And obviously he's just one person, but he has a very large following, and a lot of his following are like Trump supporters. And and he's like not right wing. I feel like he's more in the center, but he's like pro choice. He believes, and also he's supportive of trans people. Like, he thinks that anybody should be able to do what they want with their own body. You know, it's like if somebody wants to, like, you know, have a robot arm with like a cannon in it, he thinks that would be pretty badass. Or if they like want to replace their arm with a sword or something like that, like he, you know, he's okay with that. Or people having like horns in their like, you know, surgically altered their body to have horns or some shit like that. He thinks everybody should have that right. So he agrees with like bodily autonomy, which is very against what the right wing people want. But he's also not like pro like human rights in the sense of like understanding the deeper social issues, because you can, like I said, you can be correct, but that doesn't make you right. Yeah, I mean, rights are really not existing, and that's why we have to fight so hard for them. They are a privilege. You're exactly right, Cole. We actually inherently don't have any rights because society is made up by humans. We're born into a world, a universe, that the only law is that there's really just some physical laws that exist, and everything abides by them, and it's not by choice. Like, literally, the only reason we exist is because cells reproduce a certain way, and because evolution has kind of just made this random thing happen. Really, like, there is absolutely nothing stopping somebody from taking you when you're born and slamming you against a wall. But we create repercussions for activity like that. The abilities that people can... No, the thing is we can... It's really important that we set lines, because the lines are inherently not there. And some people don't need the lines to be drawn. Like, I you know, it's like, just because it's legal doesn't mean you should do it. Like, what if it was legal to like I'm getting into dangerous territory here, but like, what if it was legal to shoot somebody? Doesn't mean you should go shoot somebody. Like, you know, even if it was legal, even if someone put the gun in my hand, I would drop the gun immediately and get the fuck away, because I hate guns, I hate violence, I hate death. I extremely am opposed to gun violence. And I think that murder is like the worst crime you can commit, because you chose to take someone's life into your own hands. And the fact that somebody would think that it's okay just because somebody said, oh, you're not going to, yeah, exact, danger. Yeah, or like littering. Like, what if littering was legal? If someone said, hey, you can throw this on the ground, you're not going to get in trouble for it, I'm still going to throw it in the garbage can. Right? But some people are just going to throw it on the ground because they're like, fuck yeah. I don't want to, the man is going to make me use a garbage can. Like, some people literally go out of their way to flip a middle finger to society, and I think that's fucking stupid and wrong. Like, it's one thing if you do something by accident or you don't know any better. But it's like if it's like if you like just it's like pissing on somebody's windshield just because that person like pissed you off, and so you pissed on their car. Like, why? Like, an eye for an eye, revenge? And it's like the justice system, the criminal justice system, and at least in the United States, for especially, it's all about revenge. It's like, oh, this person committed a crime, so let's punish them. And then you know what happens is people act like it works, and it doesn't. It's like, obviously, yeah, we don't want to like salute people for committing crimes, but like, it's not going to solve the problem, which is preventing crime. But like, you put somebody in an environment where where it's extremely dehumanizing, where they have like very little freedom, where they're around people who are also in that situation, who are also violent, and you expect the problem to go away, it gets so much worse. And this is proven. This has been researched and documented. It's called recidivism. Is that if you put people in an environment where it's not going to be conducive to healing, if you just punish people for committing crimes, they're more likely to commit crimes when they're released from prison. It's just like, but people are like, oh, but we don't want to treat these people nicely, they committed a crime. It's like, you know, it's because people say like, oh, well, I have to pay $3,000 a month for rent, but that person gets 3 hots and a cot. Or like, you know, why are you treating your prisoners better than you're treating law-abiding citizens? It's because maybe there's 2 problems. Maybe both of those are a problem, and you're fighting the wrong thing. That you're trying to fight the thing that is also like, maybe you should be fighting the thing that's bigger than that. Like the fact that you have to judge whether or not you call an ambulance because you're like, oh, well, it's going to cost me a lot of money to go to the hospital and call an ambulance. The fact that that's even in your thinking, like if you're like got your arm chopped off, like think about it. Like the fact that the medical system is set up to be basically, if either you get your life saved, but you owe money for like the rest of your life, and you're gonna be in so much debt because you're gonna owe like tens of thousands of dollars for medical treatment, when that treatment should just be provided to you. But people are like, oh, but who's gonna pay for it? And it's like, okay, well, who's charging for it? Why aren't we like holding these people accountable? Why are they charging so much? Like the, you know, the whole thing with insulin prices. Insulin does not cost $200 a bottle to make, which is why they capped the price of insulin recently. It only costs like, the cost of production, I think, is like $20 a bottle, and that's a month's supply. Yeah, I mean, if you're treating your prisoners badly, just think about how you're treating the citizens. Because the citizens, obviously there's always going to be people who are just fundamentally like mentally ill, and they just need some help. And hopefully they could get some help instead of getting too late to the point where they explode. Sometimes literally. But like, if you treated your citizens right, there would be less crime. There's a reason why people are becoming criminals. Is because if you don't know how you're going to pay rent, and you can't really get enough money to pay rent, and then there's an option to make money by doing crime, and you just want to put food on your table to take care of your family, like, is the choice going to be homelessness and just dying of exposure or starvation because the homeless shelters are crowded? And if you sleep out in the streets, you're probably gonna get like your shit stolen, or you're probably gonna get like, you know, like assaulted. You know, it's like there's no system in place to protect people, to prevent them from committing crimes. And it's like, this is a huge problem. Obviously, it's been talked about a lot, but it's like there's so many factors to be able to like draw conclusions in such a black and white manner, which I wish, you know, I really wish, I don't really know how it would go, but I really wish that somebody like Asmongold would be willing to have a conversation with me. I don't think he's ever going to. I just don't think he's willing to have, I don't know. I don't think so. But, you know, it's like, I don't know what I would say. I would just have to play it by ear. But the thing is like, there's so many reasons why, if you have a conclusion that's based on a false assumption, your next assumption is going to be false and your next conclusion is going to be false. And it's like, you might be factually correct and nobody is arguing with you that you're factually incorrect. What we're talking about is that you need to take a step back and maybe look at why people are so angry about the things that people are like, oh, but I have the right to say this. 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 It's a freedom of speech. It's freedom of speech. It's like, okay, you're just closing your ears. La, 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 la. I won't listen to anything. All I care about is my opinion that's based on limited knowledge. Like, don't you want more information? Don't you want to make a better opinion that's formed upon more information instead of dismissing information as opinions? Oh, I don't subscribe to gender ideology. It's like, okay, the fact that you even consider it an ideology and not just a fact of life that some people are trans and there might even be a biological link to it that people can't control. And even if there wasn't, it's still a socially evolved thing that obviously some people are trans or gay. Yeah, rob Trump and move to Korea. That's always the solution. No matter what happens, if you drop milk on the floor, rob Trump and move to Korea. If your car breaks down, rob Trump and move to Korea. Yeah, by the way, that's a meme. Don't actually do that for all legal liability purposes. I am not advocating for this. Yeah, 2024 California, exactly. Yeah, that was actually 2024, wasn't it? Where it's like people can't get jobs and so they're just basically put into a ghetto. I mean, well, that was basically a commentary on what on what fascism leads to. Because that's what Nazi Germany was doing. That's where, they put certain classes of people and they did so based on like heritage or based on like whether or not they were like gay or mentally ill or trans or Jewish, and they saw anybody who was non-Aryan as like a disease, and so they basically like had these people live in what's called a ghetto, where that was a space designated for these people. And of course we know what happened, where that leads. Basically, I was talking about this yesterday. There's no other direction that this can lead. All this like attacks against trans rights and against trans people. And even when it's not even about legal stuff, just the fact that there's this general air of negativity fomenting in society that is averse to trans existence. That you can't like so many people can't look at a trans woman without feeling disgusted. And that has been brainwashed into you. It has been brainwashed into me too. I was disgusted with myself. And I was transphobic when I was a lot younger. Because it's brainwashed into you that trans equals gross. And if you really think about it objectively, is it really as gross as you think it is? Or are you just insisting that it's gross? Like you're convincing yourself that it's wrong, and you're coming up with all sorts of reasons to justify that belief. Instead of like taking a step back and saying, hey, like, why am I so focused on this? Why am I so obsessed with transgender medicine? Why am I so willing to accuse that of being malicious? And yet the determinations for transgender healthcare is determined by the same exact people who determine the standards of care for literally every single other medical treatment that we give people. And people don't question, like, I mean, I'm sure people do question like cancer treatment, but I doubt people question cancer treatment the same way they treat transgender treatment. Yeah, that was happening in the DS9 two-part episode. It was like they basically made a ghetto. It wasn't a concentration camp. It was just a like an internment camp kind of thing. It was more like a ghetto. But they were imprisoned. They couldn't leave. So that was more like an internment camp. It wasn't necessarily a concentration camp. I guess it's like Escape from New York. It was like an open air. I mean, it was like Gaza, if you really think about it. It was an open air prison. The concentration camp was like literally like forced labor and and then like mass murder. But what happened in the DS9 episode was basically like, it was like, hey, we don't want to see you, we don't want to deal with you, let's just put you in this space. That was more like what happened before the concentration camps, like with the ghetto, where they would just have the Jewish people live in very specific districts, and they also put trans people and gay people along with them. And obviously it's usually glossed over when people talk about the Holocaust. Obviously it's not ignored. People do mention that gay people and trans people and mentally ill people, like schizophrenics and all that kind of stuff, they were also marched into concentration camps. I would have been put in a concentration camp. I would have been murdered at some point if I was in Nazi Germany at that time, if I was getting access to transgender medicine at the time, which was brand spanking new because they had only recently learned how to synthesize estrogen in the 20s and 30s, and that's when transgender treatments for trans women started, because people are like, hey, we can synthesize this hormone, let's see if it's safe. And it was researched, and the people who were researching it to make it safer and to see what is actually helpful for trans people who historically only had socially transitioning as an option. Maybe there was like natural dangerous ways to transition medically, but I mean, that is outdated terminology, so I'm going to give you a timeout, and that's my only warning. Do not use outdated terminology. That is what people used in the frickin' 50s. Okay, I'm like really you're really sus because you might just be a white guy pretending to be a black guy. I don't know that. I'm not going to accuse you of that. But if you're going to talk like that, you're obviously trying to instigate something, because that's the way that people talked in the 50s. And it was because people wanted to use, it's like what people use now is woke. Because they can't use the N-word anymore. The same sentiment just changes words. They say words like thug. They say words like woke. They say words like, oh, don't all lives matter? It's the same sentiment. The sentiment has not changed. The terminology can change, and the sentiment is the same. And that's why people have such a. It's not about the policing of a word. It's about trying to get people to understand why what they're doing is harmful. Yeah, it's a very good episode because it's like there's nothing we can do, but it's a start. That line that Cisco says. But it's a start. And it's like, you can't be perfect. There is no perfect solution. But what's the alternative? The alternative is just allowing it to continue to foment and ferment. Allowing the problem to get worse because you're not even willing to try. And it's like people will just justify, oh yeah, we're tired of these LGBTQ, these alphabet people. They're always just so angry all the time. And it's like they're delusional. And it's like, well, you already started off with an assumption based on your opinion. You don't understand all the complexities of what is going on. And so you're not even a part of the people who are being harmed. And this is why I have an issue with Asmongold's and people like him who have a large audience who constantly justify their opinions based on false assumptions. It's like, yeah, obviously you can say whatever you want. That's not the issue. Freedom of speech is not the issue, although there is a certain point where freedom of speech is not allowed. Okay, you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. You can't like start saying like, oh, let's storm the Capitol. You know, like that's insurrection. That's inciting violence, which is the same as pulling the trigger yourself. Look at Charles Manson. Okay, he didn't actually pull the trigger, but he had somebody else do it for him. Okay, so just because you didn't do it yourself, you know, your speech can be insightful of violence. And there's certain speech, which is why people are so angry about the propagation of transphobic ideology, because that actually is an ideology. The transphobic, the anti-trans rhetoric is an ideology, and it's an ideology that says trans people are delusional, they're not actually their gender, therefore they need to be eradicated. Because as much as you want to convince yourself, that line of thinking can only lead to eradication, which means genocide. And then people are like, oh, but you know that they castrate themselves anyway, so they're already committing genocide. It's like, no, that's not the same. Like, we have the choice on whether or not we want to end our own bloodline. And some people, they don't even have to be trans to do that. They can take a life of celibacy, or they can just choose never to have children. They can always use contraception. Plenty of people don't continue their bloodline, but when it's trans people, suddenly it's a big issue. Maybe it's because you have a prejudgment, a prejudice about trans people that is based on an assumption that we're delusional and that there's something wrong with us and that we need to not be trans. And that every opinion that you have is based on these assumptions. And if you took a step back and said, like, why am I so mad about this? Why am I so angry about these people existing? Why am I not angry about this other thing that's kind of similar? Like, people are angry about trans medicine, but the trans medicine is determined by a panel of people that is based on empirical evidence that is peer-reviewed by scientists. And they say, oh, but you know, we need to question the science. But you don't question the science when that same exact panel of people applies it to cancer treatment or any other treatment. So clearly there is an anti-trans agenda, and you might not be wittingly part of it, but if you refuse to take a step back and analyze why people are probably why people are angry at you for saying or doing something, maybe taking a step back to look at maybe they're right. Maybe there's a reason why people are angry, and maybe they're not just crazy. It's so easy to just dismiss people because you're like, oh, well, that's just that person's crazy. That's just an angry person on the internet. That's a blue-haired liberal or whatever. And it's like, okay, whatever. But if like a whole movement of people are standing up and saying we will not be moved, we have a pride parade saying we are here, we're queer, get used to it, and we will absolutely not back down from hate and from violence, maybe there is something that you are doing wrong. Maybe. And I don't know. It's stochastic terrorism. I don't know if that's how, I don't know if it's a weird term. It's like, it's basically you're creating an environment where you're kind of making sense, but you're not really. But like, you can't argue that you're like outright inciting violence. Like people like Ben Shapiro, for example, or like Jordan Peterson. And even Jordan Peterson was willing to admit after many years, Jordan Peterson was willing to admit that his policy on allowing people to discriminate against gay people, businesses to discriminate against them as free speech, and then having it compared to like, oh, but in the 60s people were saying that they should have the right, so you think that people should have the right to refuse service to black people. He's like, oh no, that's different. And it's like, is it? They're like, oh, it's different. Yeah, it's like it's different, but it's the same. It's just a different specifics. It's about gay people instead of about black people, which is a very different thing. Or and now, instead of about gay people, it's about trans people. People are like, oh yeah, but you know, I'm a doctor and I've researched transgender medicine and I know everything about transgender medicine and the trans experience, so therefore and it's like, no, you don't. You're a random person on the internet who has probably never even met a trans person, has never investigated or researched transgender medicine at all, who has never even like stopped to think that maybe their opinions are based on false assumptions, that maybe they have been brainwashed by social media and by just the media in general. For example, movies like Dude, Where's My Car? Where like and where there was a profuse vomiting at the discovery that a woman had a penis. Movies like Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, the first one, which Jim Carrey himself said he would never want to do something like that again. Where as soon as there was a woman discovered that a woman had a penis, everyone started to vomit. That we have movies that in the past of men dressing like women, which basically is very different than trans women, but they might be trans, they might not be, but this idea of a man dressing up as a woman being a murderer, like in Psycho, wearing his mom's clothing and reenacting all that and being psycho and all that. And where, in real life, there was like a person that, his mother died and he would do that and he would like wear people's skin. And then there was like Silence of the Lambs, which even the author in the book made a very clear point of providing a scene where Starling went to a transgender clinic and investigated and made it very clear that like this isn't an attack on trans people. And yet when the movie came out and they have the "I'd fuck me" scene and the tucking scene, and now suddenly everybody compares trans people to fucking Buffalo Bill. And do people not understand that this has been a systematic prejudice that has been brainwashed into people, including trans people, because we're also people and we also got brainwashed the same way? And if there's any kind of agenda or grooming, as people call it, which is a really fucked up thing to say, because grooming is a very specific thing, and it's taking away the power of that word to basically just make it into meaninglessness. But it's a very serious problem, and children are being harmed. Children are actually being harmed, but not by transgender medicine. Children are being saved by transgender medicine. And it's been proven time and time again. And then they're like, oh yeah, but what about this one person who went really loud on Twitter about detransitioning? And it's like, okay, yeah, that person has a very negative experience. But you're going to base anecdotal evidence for the actual majority of people, which is like 99% of people are very happy with transgender medicine, which is an insanely positive successful number, because even like other treatments don't have 99% success rate. Out of any treatment out there, like I think diabetes has less of a success rate of treatment. Like diabetes has way less of a successful treatment, and that's it's like 50% of United States of Americans have diabetes. And most people do not get successful a lot of people don't get successful treatment because they're unwilling to do the work. But even diabetes has I could look up the actual number. Success rate of diabetes treatment. Okay, according to a 2020 study, 61% of patients who received a combination of diet and exercise treatment for diabetes reversed their condition. 61%. For type 2 diabetes, the remission rates are 75% at 3 months, 75% at 1 year, and 68.75% at 2 years. The American Diabetes Association recommends that most adults have an A1C goal of less than or equal to 7.0%. In 1999 to 2002, 64% of adults had blood pressure control. Effective blood sugar management can reduce the risk of eye disease, kidney disease, and nerve disease by 40%. So 61% success rate. I don't know the rate of diabetes in U.S. Okay, it's 11.6% of the population. I was wrong about that. But there's also like 29.7 million diagnosed and 8.7 million were undiagnosed. I don't know how they get that information if they're undiagnosed. Yeah, so it's 11.6% of the population. A significantly higher percentage than trans people, which are like 1%. So 1%, a calculator, 0.01, 0.01, oh God. 0.01 times 8,000,000,000,000. That's 8 billion. Wait, thousands, 100,000, 100 million, 8 billion. 0.01 times 8 billion is still 80 million people. Now, that's 0.01 times 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 8. It's 8 figures, right? Or yeah, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. No, it's 9 zeros, right? Thousands, millions, billions. 0.01 times 8 billion is 80 million. Now, let's just do 11%. 0.11 times 8, millions, thousands, hundreds. That's 880 million. I mean, it's 10 times as much. I could have just multiplied it by 10. 800 million people have diabetes. Only 64% of those people reverse their type, and that's type 2 diabetes, by the way. So that's 0.64 times 880 million. That's 563 million people get treated out of 880 million. So minus 563 to 563200000. 316.8 million people don't reverse their diabetes. That's a lot of people. Now let's do I think it's like 1% of 1%. So 1%, 0.01 of 80 million, which is the number of trans people, give or take. I have a really hard time with numbers. 80 million. 0.01 of 80 million? It's a significant amount of people. This is why it's so easy. It's 800,000 people might experience transition regret. It's a significant amount of people, which is why it's so easy to say, oh, but what about detransitioners? Obviously, those are real people with real struggles. And we can't we can't just judge oh, that person only, it's so easy to say, oh, most of the time that person detransitioned because of social pressure, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe they had a very religious family. There's so many factors. It's not up for us to decide that. That's the individual. They have their own experience, and it's absolutely terrible what they've gone through. But comparatively, if 100 minus 64 is if 36% of people went around and said, well, I wasn't able to reverse my diabetes, so therefore people should stop getting their diabetes treated. If what's 36.36 times 8 100 million, thousand, 100. If 288 million people went around and said, well, I wasn't able to reverse my diabetes, so therefore everyone else should, all the other 600 million people should stop getting diabetes treatment. 64% is a huge fucking success. And so 99% is a significantly higher success rate, and yet people have this delusion into thinking because, oh, but what about these one or two people who are very loud on social media saying that they had a transition regret? It's like, okay, but if those people were diabetic and they had regret about getting diabetes treatment, would we stop diabetes treatment for the 64% of people who does work for? Like think about it. And that's like 11% of the population. We're only 1% of the population. People have this like aversion to reality where they look at numbers and they think because it's a high number that it's like worse than like another number. But if you think about it, like even if 64% of transgender patients did not experience regret, even if 36% of transgender people experienced regret, it's still the same. That would be the same as diabetes treatment. And we treat diabetes still, even though obviously not everybody is going to have success. It's just, it blows my mind that people have this cognitive dissonance where they can't detach themselves from the emotion to understand how ridiculous it is to be advocating for the things that they're advocating for, which is to take away medicine that has been empirically proven to help 99% of the people that undergo it. And it's still voluntary. It's still voluntary treatment. The people who undergo transgender medicine are not forced to go through it. They volunteer to go through it because we know we need it. It is an elective process. And you know, even diabetic people can refuse treatment. You can be like, oh, I don't want to take insulin. So I don't know where this idea comes from that somehow transgender medicine is dangerous. It is an elective treatment that helps 99% of the people who pursue it, and there's a 1% regret rate, which is terrible, but these people were informed. These people should have been more educated. They should have taken more initiative because they had all the information available to them. They had all the risks conveyed to them. They signed away a waiver saying that they understood that this was not guaranteed to help them. They were not groomed into it as they are so convinced that they were, that maybe they convinced themselves that people were, you know, it's like, I hate to gaslight people, but I think that's what happened. I think these people were convinced that if, you know, maybe they were delusional themselves and they thought that the people around them were trying to force them to be trans. Maybe they were just being supportive. Maybe they were just like, hey, like, we love you for who you are. And you know, 99% of people, transgender medicine is the answer for who are going through this. But even they aren't pressured into it. And they're like, oh, but I was made to feel pressured. It's like, okay, you're a fucking adult. And they're like, oh, but I was a child. It's like, okay, we take children who are younger than 5 to church and tell them about Jesus Christ and about the gospel. And you're going to sit here and tell me that you are a freaking teenager with the help of parents and doctors to give you an informed decision that you can't even make until you're a certain age. And you're going to tell me that you were groomed into it? Like get the fuck out of here with that. Get the fuck out of here with that. It's just so ridiculous. Yeah, people see it as like it's some kind of like, oh, like people just want to look pretty. It's like, well, yeah, a lot of women like to look pretty, but in our case, there is a severe medical difference. Like, I was assigned male at birth and I had to undergo male puberty. Imagine how that would torture you. What if you were male and you were forced to go through female puberty and you were forced to have gender reassignment surgery and have your penis turned into a vagina against your will? That's what it feels like to be trans. It feels like I against my will was assigned male at birth, because that is what happened. I should have been born female. But unfortunately, biology had other plans. But, you know, we have an understanding of biology to manipulate it, to be like correcting that issue. Be like, okay, but society needs to catch up, because transgender medicine has gotten pretty damn far. It's not that complicated. I mean, it needs more research. Obviously, everything does. But it's pretty straightforward. You know, hormones are pretty adaptable to the human body. Our whole body is designed to run on hormones, and we learn how to synthesize, you know, estrogen and testosterone, and it adapts to the body pretty damn easily. It's pretty damn safe. It's safer than insulin. Like insulin is like, I don't even like insulin is like, you know, still like not 100%. It you know, obviously there's always factors with, I mean, insulin's another hormone. Like insulin, I mean, insulin is pretty adapted to the body, because even though we synthesize it or process it or whatever, it's still like it adapts to your body the same way as the insulin that your pancreas would create. Just like that, the synthetic estrogen would react to the body the same way that your body, that your like uterus and like ovaries would produce. I don't know the 100% of the biology. Just like testosterone is produced in the testicles, 80% more than is produced in the pineal gland, or whatever. Like it's like it's like an insanely, like testicles create like an insane amount of testosterone. And if you take estrogen for long enough, even without anti-androgens, eventually you lose like 92% of your testosterone production. And I had orchiectomy, which means I lost 100% of my testicles. So, you know, I don't create testosterone that way, only in the pineal gland. But it's just, if you actually, and the thing is that these people, and this is why people are so frustrated, is that the people who are anti-trans do not care about the science. Because if they did, the science disagrees with them. And because they don't want it to disagree with them, they're going to do all sorts of mental gymnastics to convince themselves that the science is wrong. When the science is not wrong, this is the same science that comes up with treatments for diabetes. It's the same science that comes up with treatment for cancer, or any other, or schizophrenia, or ADHD, or autism. It's the same science. And because you don't understand it, you're going to jump to conclusions about it, and you're going to make judgments about it. And it's been brainwashed into you by society that trans people are ugly and should be stigmatized. Even if you don't think it has, it has. You know, especially in Hollywood. And then when people try to reverse that, it's called woke. Just because people are trying to reverse the stigma that has been created, like, obviously, yeah, it's going to be kind of uncomfortable at first, but that's just the trial and error of storytelling. How do you? Here's the problem, and the problem we're trying to solve is, how do you convey with compelling storytelling that trans people and other marginalized people deserve to be treated with the same respect as everyone else, without sounding too woke or whatever. And it's a problem because people have made it into somehow being an agenda. And it's like, well, the agenda is a response to another agenda, which is the anti-trans agenda. It's, you know, we wouldn't have to advocate for all this trans acceptance if we were already accepted. We wouldn't have to have Pride Parade if people accepted gay people. We wouldn't have to have the Million Man March if black people were treated the same as white people. and not being a third of the vote, and then have like segregation laws, like Jim Crow laws, and then like basically, yeah, now that you can't legally harm black people, you have to find other ways that you can wiggle around the system to harm black people, and even subconsciously against your own knowledge. That's what subconscious brainwashing is. And I had to break myself out of that in order to come to terms with the fact that I'm trans, because I had subconscious prejudices. I had these things. Okay, and I had to overcome them because otherwise I couldn't face reality that I am trans. I can't change this. I have tried to change this. I spent years of my life living in toxic behavior, trying to be okay with being a man, and it's not okay. And if you accept that, you can understand why it's not okay, and that it's good that I've gotten help. Because imagine if you were a male and you woke up one day and you were female, and you desperately wanted to just not be female and you wanted to be male. That's the way to think about it. Not thinking of like, oh, why would a man want to become a woman? It's because I'm not a man wanting to become a woman. I'm a woman wanting to feel like a woman. That's the way to think about it. Or, with trans men, it's a man wanting to feel like a man, which I think men can understand. Because a lot of men want to be feeling like a man. They feel like less of a man in certain cases. Sometimes they attach their manliness or their manhood to their genitals even, which is perfectly, obviously it can get a little bit weird sometimes, especially when it comes to like size. It's like and maybe some women care about size, but like honestly, like bigger is not better. And if you really want to ask yourself, maybe it's because you care about it being big. You're like, oh, but women like big dicks. Like, no, men like big dicks. Because you want to have a big dick to swing around because it makes you feel more like a man. And if you can understand that concept, you actually understand trans people more than you realize. Because that's what it feels like to be trans. Is like when guys want to swing around a big dick and be like confident in their masculinity, that is gender dysphoria. But it's different because you're assigned male at birth and your identity matches already. So it's like same side. It's cisgender dysphoria. It's just, confidence, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe it's neutral, depending on the context. But if you're a man and you attach your manliness to the size of your penis, you understand trans people way more than you realize. Because that's what it's like to be trans. Where I feel less like a woman because of my bone structure. I feel less like a woman because of my penis. Okay, well, I mean, it's not about that. It's just about the way you were talking about it. I generally, it's just you kind of came across as weird. And it's like, I don't like the idea of trying to verify if someone's black or not, because that's also kind of weird. But now you're coming at me with a bit of an attitude, and I don't like that. Because you came in here and you started talking in terminology that white people would use in the 50s, and then I timed you out and you came back with saying your channel is proof that you're black. That sounds really fishy to me. I don't know. It's like, it's just really fucking weird. I'm just like gonna ask you to just shut the fuck up. Like, yeah, whatever. It's like, I mean, I'm gonna take your word for it. I didn't say that you're not. I didn't say that you were. I said that's a weird argument. To say, oh, I'm black. Look at my channel. It's like, I wasn't trying to ask to confirm that you're black or not. I just asked you to not talk like that. Okay, and now you're just gonna get banned because you're gonna say, oh, well, I'm just a comedian. Dude, shut the fuck up. Get a fucking life. Yeah, I mean, I would understand if you were using that with that term in the context of like talking about James Baldwin, you know, because like back in the 50s, you know, in the 60s, people back in like the 50s, people used that terminology to talk about black people. But nowadays we say black. And also I a lot of people, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for people, but I've heard black people also want to be referred to as African American. But for the vast majority of black people, the sentiment that I understand is that we're not African, we're black. Like you trying to take someone's identity from them. Which you know, obviously, you know, ethnicity and skin color and racial differences, it's a bit different than gender identity, but it is an inherent part of your identity, you know. And because I'm white, and here's the problem with the rationale. A lot of white people who are like racist, either intentionally or unintentionally. Here's the problem with their way of thinking. They think, well, I'm white. I don't identify myself as white. I don't, you know, go around talking about how like I'm white and I'm being oppressed or whatever. So why are black people doing it? It's like, well, because you're not black. It's different. And like you're being very like just like completely ignoring an entire demographics like experience. And yeah, like I understand that, like, yeah, people are going to talk the way they talk, people are going to be comedians. You know, if you're going to be a comedian and be a little shit in here, then you can just get the fuck out of here. I understand being funny, but if you're going to, you know, use, oh, I'm a comedian after I ask you to stop being so aggressive, like, I don't care if you're white, I don't care if you're black, if you're going to have that kind of attitude, you can just get the fuck out of here. You're acting like a child. Maybe you can go over to some other streamer to fuck with them. I don't fuck around with that. Okay, we're reasonable people over here, and we joke around, but there's a difference between joking around and then like saying, oh, it was just a joke, ha ha ha. It's like, it makes it okay if it's a joke, and it's like, yeah, you didn't say anything overtly racist, but it was the attitude that you gave me after that. I'm like, hey, by the way, because I don't even know if your English is your first language. You might be in a different country where, like in Spanish, for example, negro means black. So like, obviously some people, but I even think in Spanish speaking countries, they understand the difference between, we don't call people that in English. That was things that people said in the 50s, and it was a huge part of how people, and obviously, you know, you could say, oh, it's rooted in racism because it came from the N-word, and because it was like a way for the black community to kind of like talk about their issues, which started to happen in the 50s and 60s, which is what led to the riots. And then the riots were really just a bunch of people standing up for themselves, and the police you know, raiding them and you know, hosing them down and gassing them. Like that, it was really the police who were doing the rioting. And yeah, obviously there's always going to be people who actually take advantage of a situation and really fuck shit up, or like do looting and shit like that. Obviously that's not okay, but to use that as an example is ignorant of the bigger reason that none of that shit should have been happening in the first place. And that, do you blame people for losing control in a situation like that? And that's what's happening with trans rights as well, in a different way. And then people can't see that it's the same exact thing that happened with the civil rights movement for black people. But even black people were like, oh, that's not the same. You know, like, why are you comparing yourself to black people? I'm not. And I've even met black people who were like, hey, like, Rebecca, like, you're also like a victim, like you're also a minority. Like, I'm like, it's like, I don't get it in my head. I was treated as a typical person my whole life, so it's like I have to actually be convinced by I had to be convinced by a black person that I'm actually a minority. And it's like I didn't really put two and two together there. And I don't know, it's just really hard to see this happening in this country. It's really hard to see the same thing happening over and over, and now I'm a part of it, and it was so easy for me to like be an ally before I actually accepted my identity, and that I actually am trans and I can't change that. But like to actually see it happening while I like, because I mean, it affected me before, but in a different way, because I was living in denial. But like to see what's happening and actually be a part of it, maybe it's different than what it's like for black people, but I have no way of knowing. So I really just don't know. It's something different. I think comparing it is a bad line of thinking. I think comparing it to the black experience is a really poor way of thinking about the problem. I think it's like, this is a different thing and it should be treated like a different thing, and they're both bad. But yeah, anyway, I've been kind of going on a tangent for the past 2 hours. And I kind of wanted to just get that out of my chest for a while. It was an interesting conversation. But I think it's time to play some WoW. I saw Booper pop in and then leave, so I'm like, I'm not going to let anyone decide whether or not I should talk about something, but I have been talking about this for a while, and I'm not going to like cater to, what my viewers might feel uncomfortable with or whatever. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about. It's my channel. But at the same time, I think it is time to just get to the game. It's time for me to have some fun. I've been kind of belaboring this point. I don't know how many things I'm wrong about. There's a lot of things that I'm probably very off the mark on, but at least I'm willing to accept that I could be wrong about things. I think that's the difference, is that intellectual honesty, instead of trying to, defend yourself like that guy did. He was like, oh, but I'm black, look at my channel. I'm like, okay, that sounds even more sus than if you had just like apologized and like tried to learn that, like, hey, that's like really outdated terminology. Black people generally, I have not met a single black person who says I'm a Negro. I have not seen a single black person in modern day say that. That was like how people talked in the 50s and 60s, because that's how the rhetoric was. That was normal back then. And people don't say colored anymore. So I've never heard a single black person in today's age refer to themselves that way, unless it was like because they were talking about how like they've been treated like unfairly by white people or anything, or just racism in general. So I mean, I don't want to speak for black people, but I've talked to a lot of black people who've talked about that, and there's a thing called white fragility, where we feel afraid to even like talk about this. But it's like from the people I've talked to, like basically we need to like, stop being little bitches about it. Like it's perfectly like, a lot of black people I've listened to and heard from talking about this, they're like, yeah, like why are you so afraid to talk about this? Like I feel like it's more racist to be walking on eggshells than it is to just talk about things. But if you talk about things in a very hostile way, and like a very just like antagonistic way, I feel it comes across pretty obvious. And it's like, it's pretty obvious when it's like someone who's like very unwilling to like investigate their own thoughts and very unwilling to actually have an intelligent conversation. They just want to be very loud about their opinions. They don't actually want to try to change. They just want to say, oh, why are you attacking me for having opinions? Why are you, this woke culture needs to stop, blah, blah, blah. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you making yourself a victim? Like, oh, but what about my needs? What about me feeling like really oppressed because I can't say these things without being canceled on Twitter? Like, okay, well, obviously, yeah, cancel culture is kind of weird too, but that's a different problem. And also, maybe there's a reason why people are so mad at you on Twitter, and maybe some of those people are being very unreasonable, but maybe not all of them. And maybe instead of closing your eyes and putting hands over your ears and saying, oh, I wish these people, this woke mob would stop hurting me. I'm just trying to express my opinion. Well, an opinion is really kind of meaningless if you're unwilling to investigate your opinions. Like the unanalyzed mind. Oh God. Like, if you're gonna have opinions just for the sake of having them, you may as well just shut the fuck up. Because you're basically saying that I'm gonna have these opinions, but I'm not gonna listen to any other opposing opinions. And it's like, okay, like, it's one thing to say, like, okay, like, I want to have a discussion. Oh, there's points on both sides. That's not always the case. Sometimes points are just bad. They're not points at all. They're just wrong. There's no both sides. There's no good people on both sides. Okay? Yeah, there were people who were victims of Nazi Germany, who were like, you know, who like were, you know, part of that without knowing what was going on. But they weren't the actual Nazis, but they were still, like, I don't know. It's like, you can't say that you can just intellectually argue something when the things you're arguing are proven to be harmful. And saying like, oh, but shouldn't we investigate it? It's like, no, it's like if you're calling for people to be lined up and shot, which is basically what the anti-trans rhetoric comes down to, which is that people just don't like trans people and they want to see us dead. They don't want us to exist. They don't want to see us. They don't want to think about us. They don't want us to have any kind of life at all. They just want us to not be trans. That's what all this comes down to. And they might convince themselves otherwise into being like rational people or intellectual, but that's where those lines of thinking goes down. It goes down to these people are mentally ill and should be eradicated. That's what it comes down to, and that is not okay. Like, that is 100% not okay. Because I can't change who I am. You're just gonna murder me for being who I am? And I'm a pretty good person, and people generally like me. And you're saying there's something wrong with me? Like, why? What is wrong with you? But anyway, I want to change the subject. I'm getting really upset about all this. I don't want to get upset. I just want to play the game and have fun. It's kind of all I wanted to do. And I ended up going down a tangent. Why did I go over here? I'm not taking the boat. But you know, even if it was vanity, it still doesn't justify the treatment we get. Because even if it was like, oh, it's just people who want to look a certain way. Like, why is that so evil? It's not harming anyone. Transgender medicine is, you know, obviously it has repercussions, but those things are very, like, very well known and documented and portrayed to people. It needs more research always, but long-term effects, but by and large, it's pretty helpful. And even if it wasn't a biological thing, or even if it wasn't, if it was just people wanting to look a certain way, why would you deny that to people when it's not harmful and it actually really helps people a lot, actually? And I don't know, it feels really tough to try to exist in a world like that. And then people wonder why the rate of suicide is so high. because it's like you're just trying to live in life and be accepted, and yet everywhere you go, people think they get to have an opinion on whether or not you should exist, and they'll talk to you about it right in your face too. But I guess I don't know. I need to kind of check my privilege, because I mean that's what black people have been dealing with since, like, you know, slavery. So, you know, I'm not really sure how to think about this. But you know what? I think I need to calm the fuck down and just...
I'm gonna enjoy this. Back off, pup. Heal me! Quickly! Back off, pup.
Oh god. Am I getting disconnected? The hell? Hey, welcome back twice. It has more defense, but I don't need intelligence and spirit. Yeah, I'm really sorry twice. I got really kind of on a tangent at the beginning of the stream. I talked for like 2 hours. It really does bother me when I get stuck on these kind of topics. I just really wish that there was something more about my life than just being like this. Like just being a trans person, feeling like I don't have a life ahead of me. Even though I have a ton of life ahead of me. I just feel like all this is like, is this even all going? I mean, obviously this is all worth it, but like, what world am I? I can't change the world, so I can change myself and feel better about myself. But at the end of the day, none of that matters to people who don't even see me as a person that deserves to exist. That they're only like, you know, like begrudgingly allowing me to exist, which if you really think about it is just absolutely disgusting and terrifying. That people can even feel like they have the right to an opinion about whether or not I should exist. It's absolutely disgusting.
have faced many challenges. Pity they were all in vain. Soon your people will kneel to my lord. You are nothing. I answer a higher call. My lord will be the end of you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I got disconnected through there, and my internet seems to be a little bit weird, or maybe that's I don't know what's going on. Getting dropped frames and stuff like that. Sometimes restream the server is actually the problem. Sometimes my internet just has random outages. It's just a little bit frustrating sometimes. Like Xfinity's pretty good, but they have one problem where like every now and then you just have to really pay attention, and like might have to like upgrade your plan or something, or they'll charge you more. It's just kind of ridiculous. I think I'm pretty good with that. It's also like since Christmas there was like some issues. And also I'm having a really hard. I mean, at least I logged in and did a dungeon. We're still level 65. I'm kind of trying to relax a bit and not go too crazy. I already talked for 2 hours. I really did not do a ton of WoW gameplay today, but it's not like it's a big deal. I don't really care what people might think. It's like
safe travels.
Like, I mean, it's my stream and I can talk about what I want, but I also don't always want to be talking about stuff like that. I feel like talking about stuff like that can be kind of annoying for people. And yeah, you could argue that like it's kind of weird that people would have a problem like at all. But at the same time, I also personally just don't want to be talking about that stuff all the time. It upsets me. I just want to live my life and enjoy the game and enjoy my life. But it's really hard to sometimes because this stuff is always on my mind. And yeah, it's becoming less of an issue the further along I go through my treatment. And this surgery is probably going to change a lot of that, and I'm probably just going to be able to kind of blend in the background a lot more. At least with these kind of thoughts. Of like, you know, because it's so easy. I mean, it's gotten better. Because before I was able to get on hormones, for example, I was a lot more like kind of social justice warrior-y. And then as I started transitioning, that became less and less of a thing. And I kind of understand why a lot of people might turn to getting angry and shouting on Twitter and stuff like that. Because for a lot of the time, it's like you have so many undealt with feelings that you just aren't getting treatment for. And then when you start getting the treatment, things are like, you know what? Things aren't so bad. Obviously, the things are still important and can still be talked about, but it just has a different vibe to it. Like right now, I can talk about it. It's a little bit more intellectual rather than like, I have this huge thing weighing down on me on top of that. And now I can kind of like say, okay, well, I personally feel better about my life. And I can just kind of approach this problem and actually focus on the problem rather than trying to focus on like these undealt with feelings. Whereas I'm dealing with the feelings by getting my treatment and getting the surgeries. And so like the longer time goes on, I think the closer to feeling normal I become, and being able to actually just be happy with my life. And that's what people don't really always understand. Like, I mean, imagine if you're always battling yourself. That's not a life worth living. But imagine if you're just okay with yourself and you can feel good in your own body and you don't feel like you're battling yourself all the time. Like, maybe like, you know, you can have healthier interactions with people. But yeah, that's kind of how things are. You know, we played a dungeon today. I finished a quest, apparently. I didn't have it before, but I grabbed the quest last time I played, so, or maybe the time before that, I'm not sure. But you know, I might be back later, but I got stuff to do today. I gotta go to the grocery store. I do have to go exercise. My dad had his hip surgery and it went well, and he's gonna be back later, so I just want to make sure things are like kind of cleared out of the way. I turned on my ice machine so that he can have, because I got an ice machine in preparation for my surgery, and it's actually helpful for him because he needs ice. And you know, so like I'm gonna let him use the ice pack I got in the ice machine. I have that all set up for him. Just gonna make sure everything's kind of cleared out of the way so he doesn't like have to have any issues. He's gonna have to use a walker for a little bit. He's gonna recover. The doctor called this morning, said he's doing well. He's just in recovery. He should be back today, soon, or later. I don't know, but yeah, I just gotta take care of things. I gotta do my grocery shopping, and I don't know. It's just I'm gonna be okay. I know that like sometimes it's really hard to avoid like a lot of the reality going on, especially when there's a lot of really, really bad things happening in the world. But I can't let that keep me down. And in the end of the day, you know, if you think my life's bad, you know, look at World of Warcraft. I mean, the players have been abused by Blizzard for the past 20 years. At least I'm only just now showing up. What am I getting myself into with playing World of Warcraft? Imagine if after all my efforts to do other things in life, what if streaming World of Warcraft and raiding with a guild becomes my career? What if that was what made me money? Like, that's ridiculous. I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't want it to happen, actually. It's like, I don't want World of Warcraft to be my career. No, I mean, I'd be okay with that, but I don't think that's gonna happen. I know a lot of people seem to want that to happen. It's kind of odd. But you know, I think most likely what's gonna happen is I'm gonna have my surgery. I'm gonna take a lot of time for myself, and then I'm gonna slowly start to get my career developed in the porn industry, and in the modeling industry, and in the acting industry, and you know, even in the music industry. And maybe my streaming will. If streaming ever becomes a thing for me, it's going to be as a result of my other efforts, and it's just going to kind of follow along with it, because it's just going to be like an inevitability. If I had like 1 million followers, then obviously they're going to follow me other places too, like on Twitch and stuff. So you know, it's like if I get success elsewhere, then, you know, Twitch and stuff, it's not the goal, though. The goal is to get success elsewhere. And that's what I'm aiming for. Like, success. Bye-bye.